You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for the show. And you know what? This is a non-Visions Monday. Finally.
Thank you.
Right?
Lord.
After what, 9 weeks or actually longer probably, because I know we missed a show here and there, but yeah, man. I know it was kind of a brutal ride for you, so I'm sure you're happy finally once again to be talking about something else.
Indeed. But I mean, like I say, at least it wasn't really that bad.
No, actually, it wasn't. And if you guys missed any of that, I mean, not right now because we're live and we need you to watch the show now. But, when we're done throughout the week or whatever, you should go back and check out our review of Season 2 of Visions. I mean, we reviewed each of the episodes. You guys can probably just blow through them and then watch the reviews. It was interesting because it was not as bad as one. But at the same time, even though I will say that I kind of enjoyed actually reviewing Visions this time, it is nice to finally be getting back to some other Star Wars stuff. Because in the time that we've been doing it, they've done a lot of stuff. And of course, not the least of which is the million trailers that we've gotten from Ahsoka. But what makes this one special is a couple of things. One, it reveals a little bit more. Actually, I would say a lot more. And then it also, of course, gives us our first look at this guy. Our first look at the live-action Thrawn. So there's a lot of things, even though there's been, I don't know, I want to say at least it feels like 3 or 4 or 5 trailers now for Ahsoka. This one seemed a little bit more significant, and that's why I think that you and I thought, let's actually do a reaction. Let's review this thing. Let's break it down for everybody. I know you had voiced some concerns. I'm a little skeptical about a couple of things. So, I mean, once we actually react to it, and again, we'll make comments here and there. I got the audio a little, trying to avoid copyright strikes, because YouTube is getting even weirder about everything. In fact, we've even looked into other streaming. I mean, we'll never leave YouTube, but Rumble is another possible thing. I got an account open there. I might try to either stream both on Rumble and here, or stream here and then it just automatically syncs with Rumble. So if you guys, want to check out Rumble or whatever, maybe I'll put a link to of it into the description. But I really do think, though, that this is probably the most significant Ahsoka trailer that we've gotten so far.
Yeah, and before we even take a look at this trailer, I can't help but notice that Thrawn kind of looks like Brent Spiner. He looks like
I know.
Data.
You know what? I thought the same thing. I was like, wow, dude, he's got some Data vibes going,
Yeah, he looks like Data from Star Trek Next Generation.
Well, I think that I was always wondering how they were going to pull him off in live action. And I mean, I will say, just like from this still, that they did do a good job. At first...
That's a person I never thought about. When we were trying to figure out who would play Thrawn, I never thought about Brent Spiner.
I know.
But Brent Spiner would actually kind of be,
Yeah, maybe. Well, you know what? I think more so if they had done this 10 or 20 years ago. Now, again, I mean, Brent Spiner has been, besides some of the other stuff he's done, he has been in the Picard series on Paramount Plus. And I saw season 1. I started watching season 2. It was a little strange. Everybody's been saying that season 3 is so amazing and doesn't really have anything to do with season 2 that I should just jump ahead and go do that. So I'm getting ready to do that, and then I'll loop back to season 2 where they actually introduce Q again. It was nice to see John Delancey, reprising that role. But it was interesting because the way that Brent Spiner looks and acts now, he probably could still pull it off, but he might be a little bit old for the role now. But I would 100% agree that, if this were being made 15, 20 years ago, Well, hands down. I mean, Data kind of, you just pop blue skin and red eyes in him. You know, white outfit, right? I mean, you're pretty much there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I thought that it was really cool that they that they decided to do this. And I mean, there's like a lot of stuff in this trailer too. You know, we get to see a little bit more of Sabine. And then I remember in one of the earlier trailers when they showed Sabine, you actually had some concerns about the fact that it's like, well, you know what? I guess they decided to change her hairstyle or whatever. But in this trailer, they actually show you how she...
Yeah, when she did.
Yeah, when she cuts her hair and kind of it goes back to the Sabine...
That little pixie cut that she had.
Exactly. What we're familiar with in Rebels. So I thought that was a nice touch. You know, there was a lot of things in this trailer that I was like, okay. Now, of course, there's other YouTubers and everything that have been just tearing this thing apart and just showing how this is further proof that Star Wars has been destroyed. And it's funny because we've actually, some of the comments that we've gotten on our recent videos, it's been interesting because one of the things that somebody pointed out, I don't remember which person it was, but it was on our top 5 director show, which if you missed that, you'll want to check that out on our channel as well, where we talked about the top 5 directors that could essentially save Star Wars. But they pointed out that really it's the writers. You know, it's kind of like, okay, the directors, that's fine, but I mean, unless you get a good writer in there, because it starts with the story. And of course, I pointed out that we discussed that at length. I'm pretty sure during that show, actually.
Well, we kind of talked about, you know, the writing piece as it pertains to directors. Like, you have a lot of directors who do also write their own script, like Colin Trevorrow, J.J. Abrams, you know, things of that nature, or Rian Johnson, you know. So, but specifically honing in on who should write for Star Wars, we haven't, but that's also a great topic that we should cover.
Yeah, you know, soon. Maybe that's something we should do. Now, I've more or less, sort of, uncharacteristically of us, I've somewhat locked in the next 2 shows. But maybe the one after that, you're absolutely 100% correct, man. That would probably be a really cool idea, is now go to the top 5 writers who can make Star Wars great again. That would be a great sequel. Our little Empire Strikes Back, if you will, to our director thing. Right? And then maybe, I don't know, maybe after that it becomes top 5 actors. I don't know. I mean, we can we can sequel. I mean, we got to have a trilogy. Star Wars is, if nothing else, is about trilogy, so we would need to do that. But I don't know. I think we've given some of our audience. Yeah, we're sorry that we're on like an hour later than usual, but, you know, schedules rear their ugly heads. That's right.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you guys want to stop that and you want us to do a consistent time, buymeacoffee.com. So you can buy us a blue milk. There's a link in the description. You can either become a member or you can, you know, do some one-time donations or something, but every little bit helps because, you know, these shows do cost money to do. It's not terrible, but it's, you know, in our quest to become full-time YouTubers, that would be awesome. While you're at it, hit that like button because, of course, the algorithm likes it, and then hit the subscribe button if you have not already subscribed. And I should also take this opportunity before we roll this trailer that we did get like 2 or 3 or something new subscribers over the last few days. So, like to welcome, you know, our new subscribers. A lot of times we don't actually acknowledge that. You know, we get subscribers throughout, and it's just business as usual as we march on, you know, but I did want to take the time to do that. All right, so without further ado, let's roll this trailer and do some comments on this thing.
War is inevitable. One must destroy in order to create. We are no Jedi.
I like the music in this too.
Whispers of Thrawn's return as heir to the Empire.
Nice.
What happens when we find Thrawn?
Power. such as you've never
The
dreamed.
world of worlds.
Right?
I've spent most of my life fighting a war.
Voice
That's
might
why
be a
I'm trying
little
to
off
convince
on
you to
that.
help me prevent another one. You and I both know who could help you with this.
She's still just as stubborn as ever.
I bet your master found you difficult
Top
at
gun.
times.
Anakin never got to finish my training. I walked away from him, just like I walked away from Sabine.
You never made things easy for me, Master.
As a
Yeah,
Jedi,
see, that's
sometimes you have to
Ezra.
make the decision no one else can.
That's cool. It's
I'm
nice to
counting
see
on you
Ezra in
see
Yeah.
this
here.
through.
Nice haircut.
That was the key scene that we were just talking about.
Sometimes
That's a
we
cool
have to do
action
what's
in
right,
this.
regardless of our personal feelings.
I like that they brought that wall
Yeah,
back.
that they
into-
brought the actual animated version back. I know, that's so cool.
If we don't stop Thrawn, everything will be in vain. You have no power.
Anakin spoke highly of you.
You hear the
I'm not
Vader
here to
breathing?
discuss my
I
past.
did, and I'm really wondering about that.
Once
And
a
who
rebel,
is
always a
that?
rebel.
That droid looks familiar to me. Very Inquisitor-like stuff in this thing. All right, so there you have it. There's a trailer. You know, we might, I guess I could risk a copyright strike or something toward the end and we can roll it. Because usually we try to roll these things twice. Because inevitably there's a lot of people, you know, that don't actually watch from the very beginning. Yeah, you know, and they kind of come in the middle and it's like we're talking about the trailer. Now, we did, and I have to say this before we go on, we purposely waited this time for the trailer to be out for a while. Because number one, you know, it's always good. Well, first of all, we're reacting to it, so it's good to talk through it. But it also helps, you know, the copyright situation. But it's been up for a while. So if you guys, if this is like your first time seeing it or whatever, you are going to go back and want to watch it again. It's all over YouTube, right? So that's something. Peter Griffin actually joins us tonight, and he's answering my question. I always like it when our viewers answer my questions. He says, Droid was in Clone Wars, taught the kids, yes. Okay. There was...
when Ahsoka had that little... when they went to find Ilium to find the kyber crystals.
Yes. And there was actually an Easter egg in there too, like that R2 unit that was in there. That was actually an homage to the original action figure version of R2. I read that. I read that one, so that was definitely something. So overall, I mean, again, it did make me excited to see this, right?
Okay.
And it gave us a little bit more, but yeah, there's a couple of reservations. So I remember that you right out the gate, basically when we talked about doing the show, whenever it was either this past Friday or maybe it was this past Monday, because we had announced that we were doing this a while ago, and I said, yeah, you know, make sure that, you know, you watch us next Monday or whatever when we do the Ahsoka trailer, and just right out the gate, out of nowhere, you're just like, yeah, because, you know, I have some reservations. So I'm like, all right. So we've been waiting. So enlighten us, oh wise one. What are your reservations? And I want to see if I share them.
My biggest reservation, honestly, is the whole thing with Sabine. You know, like she's calling Ahsoka master, and I'm like, okay, is she calling her master in the sense of calling her master Jedi type thing, or is she calling her that's her master? Because it seems as in they kind of allude to it again when she says you have no power, because you see her sticking her hand out almost as if she's trying to use the Force or something. Now, this is Filoni's baby, right? Ahsoka Tano is Dave Filoni's, you know, little love child that he created. In the Clone
all
Wars.
of Rebels is too.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was getting to. Like Rebels that's his real baby in the sense of his show. So all the characters on that show, Ezra, Sabine, Hera, Kanan, like all of them are all his kind of creation. Now, my thing is, when we left Sabine on Rebels, like she's always been part of the Mandalorian camp, and we know that there was a Mandalorian Jedi at one point, Tar Vizsla. However, at no point in Rebels did they indicate at all that Sabine could be force sensitive. It was
No,
always,
she just
dealing with Ezra.
right, and she had. I mean, it was kind of like a twofold thing, right? Because, and this is where I think that they're lifting this from. She did have the dark saber, and I remember it was like Kanan maybe that was showing her because she wasn't. She was kind of clumsy with it, almost kind of like how Din was when he first got it. Where it was kind of heavy and he was pretty clumsy with. I mean, she wasn't that bad, but. Because she was obviously supposed to be wielding it. But the thing that was interesting to me was the fact that, and this is why I wanted you to go first with this, because I had the same problem, actually. It almost seems like they were trying to marry the two, because like what you said, it was really more Ezra's path that was, okay, he's actually being trained by a Padawan. And that's something that was really cool, I thought, about Rebels, that at the time people clued in on, but I think it's somewhat of a forgotten fact when people look back. And that is that what made that unique was that Kanan never ascended to a Jedi Knight. When Order 66 happened, he was a Padawan. And what's cool about it... Go ahead.
Didn't Yoda eventually grant him the rank of Knight?
Yeah, like, when he appeared to him or something like in season...
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it. Yeah, or something like that. He did, because he ended up, remember they were in the temple and he ended up fighting all those like guardians or whatever. Yes, he did eventually, he was granted that. But what made it interesting was at the onset of everything, he was a Padawan, and now he's finding that he has essentially his own Padawan, but he never really learned fully yet. It was kind of like if it was almost like if Obi-Wan had gotten Anakin like 2 years or 3 years before he did. And of course, if you guys want to follow that more clearly, the new, the New Dawn, which was actually the very first new canon book. Once they turned the expanded universe into Legends and they said, nope, we're writing all new books for the canon, now everything counts. A New Dawn was the first one, and it sort of shows how Kanan met Hera and how, Kanan was originally more or less on the path of Obi-Wan that we saw in the Obi-Wan series, where Kanan was just kind of working, just sort of doing like his own thing. And eventually what ended up happening was Kanan ended up meeting Hera, and then he got re-inspired a little bit, and then of course there was a common enemy, and I don't want to spoil the book or anything, but I mean, essentially it shows how Kanan at least got hooked up with Hera, so you get a little bit more backstory, which I think now would probably be beneficial, given that the series is coming out. But you're right that Sabine had the Darksaber, and she was learning her Mandalorian heritage, wielding that, and she was trained a little bit by Kanan in swordsmanship. But absolutely, she was not supposed to be like some sort of a Force user by any stretch.
Yeah, and you kind of have to wonder, like, okay, if they want to make that happen, I guess you can say, like, okay, well, there's enough time has passed where they're kind of trying to evolve her character in that way, in that manner. She was very close with Ezra, and this is why she's, of course, trying to go after him, because they've always kind of had a close relationship, almost like a brother and sister in a way. I don't think they were really going down the romantic path.
No.
But I think it was more so of a brother-sister type thing, almost like Luke and Leia. However...
After
later on,
after it was rewritten, yes.
Yes, after the kiss. But I think, my question is it needed though?
I know, and that's my thing.
I don't think we need Sabine to be that. If that's the case, if that's where they're going with it, I don't think it's needed.
Well, here's the problem, and this is something that we always bring up. Usually we don't bring this up until we're reviewing the first couple of episodes of any given show. We bring this up nearly every time we review a couple of shows, especially if people are chatting in and, saying things like, this is horrible, they're ruining Star Wars again, whatever. It's like, okay, we don't know the totality of the story yet. And so we don't know the context within the first couple episodes, let's say, of where things fit. And I think that this is even more of a poignant element when it comes to the trailer, right? Because the trailer is taking scenes from, who knows how many episodes. I mean, they don't usually go too far deep into it. Usually they'll get their trailers from the first 2, 3, maybe episodes tops. But even then, we have not seen a single episode yet. And I do believe they're actually releasing the first 2 on August 23rd. I think I read that somewhere, that they're actually doing the usual, they're going to drop the first 2 episodes. Yeah. But the thing is, we don't really know the context yet. And we also know that Filoni in particular loves misdirection. So he loves to make things seem a certain way. And, to the point where even he'll make it seem like a character's saying something, but if you really look closely, it's not like their mouth is moving. It's like almost like a, some sort of a cut where you're hearing the voice or something. And I mean, you have to be careful of that kind of misdirection, that especially that Filoni likes. But just taking it at face value, though, I would agree with you that, look, we don't need to go down this cliched path. Not everybody has to become a Jedi. But on the other hand, I will swing back, though, and say, just play devil's advocate. Besides, of course, you can always use the argument that, the Force flows through everybody, on and on it goes. What I would say that maybe you can address a little bit too is, if it actually made a compelling story, would you necessarily be against it? Because you do have a situation where, although, like I said, I'm 1,000% in agreement with you that, look, we don't really need this, but we also don't know the context of it yet.
True. I mean, and, context is always very important. I guess if they made a compelling story and it made sense, then sure. But because the thing about Rebels is like, well, Ahsoka is basically a continuation off of Rebels. So it's not like we're watching something that was final.
Right.
It's not like we're watching a live action version of something animated that's a complete story. You see what I'm saying?
Well, okay.
So because
let me just throw this out there before you finish, though. Because this is actually very important to your point. I did read somewhere, I didn't share this with you either. I don't know if you stumbled on this yourself or not, but because we never talked about this. Dave Filoni did confirm that Ahsoka Season 1 is essentially Season 5 of Rebels.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to, put that out there.
No, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, you can, and that's what I'm saying. It's because there wasn't it's not, there's no finality to Rebels. It was meant as it was left open ended, and now we understand why, because he already knew he was going to do Ahsoka pretty much. That's why he kind of left Rebels kind of the way that he did, which makes perfect sense, because now you can continue the story, but now in live action, which is brilliant. I love that. Honestly.
But here's the thing, and this is true, but now I don't. You guys in the chats might have to help me out on this one. I do remember reading somewhere, and I didn't catch it myself, but somebody had mentioned somewhere online that actually one of the problems with this trailer was it demonstrates that Ahsoka sort of negates or contradicts the epilogue piece that we saw on the last episode of Rebels. There are like some things that, contradict it. Now, I don't know. Again, you can't really go too heavily on a trailer, because trailers are meant to really hype you up for something, and they could, in doing that, there could be a lot of misdirection. I mean, look, in Rogue One, like, probably a good chunk of the scenes that we saw in the trailer weren't even in the movie. So I mean, you do have to kind of take that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, I think that if to your original question, if we're seeing the continuation of the story, if you're going to make Sabine force sensitive, it would seem that, like, why didn't Kanan pick up on it? Why didn't Ezra pick up on it? Why didn't, like, people who actually do have the force, and you're around them and you're close to them, like, why don't you sense that in them?
Well, it's kind of like, why didn't Vader sense the Force in Leia? I mean, he was around her like a gang at times, especially in Episode 4. I mean,
yeah,
part of it is,
I mean,
you got to allow the fact for the writers had an idea years later. And, once again,
exactly.
This is one of those things that Star Wars fans have to do. We always we're very creative in finding those canonical ways of being able to make an obvious afterthought work, right? But
yeah,
I will say that we don't know yet exactly. I mean, well, first of all, enough time has passed that maybe at the time she didn't really, it was like her Force abilities that were starting to come out. Maybe they didn't manifest themselves in a way that was strong enough that these
I was just
people,
about to say that. Yeah, like, but until people start to,
she was young,
like, well, I guess what I'm saying is, like, when Jedi find these younglings, it's usually because they have more or less an higher aptitude, I would say, or affinity for the Force. So it would seem like, okay, well, we need to grab these people because they could very easily turn to the dark side if they're not instructed properly. So let's grab a hold of them because they have more Force potential. Let's say it that way. Sabine might have a little bit of it, but it wasn't enough to register on anyone's radar. Like the Inquisitors, they were around all the time, things like that. So, and because she's more, she kind of sticks more to her Mandalorian roots. That's kind of
right, because she wasn't tapping into the Force. Not to mention, look, the people that were around her all the time. I mean, who were they? Like a Padawan, and then a guy who was brand new to the Force in Ezra. You can make the argument that Ahsoka comes a little bit later, and maybe she did, because she wasn't really around that long. I mean, it wasn't like she was in a position that she would necessarily sense the Force that strongly in Sabine, and even if she did, it might have not been her priority at that time. And then remember, she disappeared basically after the Anakin or Vader duel.
Well, yeah, I mean, her whole thing was like, first of all, she didn't know Anakin was alive when she had that confrontation with Vader.
Exactly.
In that ship, when she realized that was Vader, well, that was Anakin. She was just kind of like, oh, crap. She was already kind of dealing with Kanan and Ezra. So,
yeah. So,
she
I mean,
kind of had her hands full already.
Sure.
What was more of a pressing matter, if you will.
All right. So now David brings up something.
Right.
So he says, hello, gentlemen. What do you all think about all the stars being females, all subtext included? Okay. And then, of course, David follows it up. Hold on. Before answering this question, I want this other chat to pop up. Come on, pop up. Here we go. Sometimes it gets slow. She's a female. Of course she's Force sensitive. Yeah, exactly. Right? Okay, so to answer your question about that, there's a couple of things. Because a Critical Drinker, who's a wildly popular YouTuber, for good reason, he's actually just interviewed by Russell Brand, too, by the way, about movies and particularly female characters. And he hit the nail on the head with the problem that with Kathleen Kennedy, because this is one of the problems of Dial to Destiny, right? You have Phoebe Waller-Bridges' character is kind of like the dominant female superstar. I know everything. I'm already amazing. And now Indiana Jones is old, and, this has been one of the things. Although from Harrison Ford's point of view, really, Dial to Destiny is more about Indy trying to deal with growing older and maybe irrelevant and how that affects that character. which, if they had just stuck with that, would have been great. But what Kathleen Kennedy does, that's bad, because of course you had strong female characters in the past. I mean, even in Star Wars, right? You had Ahsoka, you had Leia, you had Mara Jade, you've had all these people. And then, of course, even in all through the 80s and 90s, you've had Sarah Connor, you've had Ripley in the Alien series. I mean, you've had, but the difference is, and this is something that he pointed out that I thought was actually very succinct. Even Gal Gadot, who recently came out and spoke against Dial of the Destiny, she basically was saying the same thing. There's a difference between a strong female character and basically trying to turn a female character into a pseudo-male character. So in other words, you know, you're just, and the problem with that too is you're not giving them any challenges or anything, because when you look at Sarah Connor, you look at Ripley, you look at all this stuff, not only were they very definitely women and they were strong females, they weren't like pseudo-males, right? But it wasn't like a Rey situation where you're going, okay, let's take a classic IP like Luke Skywalker, and now let's put that in a female body, and we'll just make it to where she's so amazing out the gate that there's no challenge, because that's where the storytelling comes in. You know, when Luke Skywalker came up, he was just kind of a farm boy that was discovering who he was and his potential. And he ran into issues. The problem with Rey was she ran into nothing. There was no drama there. She was just already amazing right out the gate. She already knew all this stuff about the Force. And that comes from Kathleen Kennedy, it turns out, who, it's not so much that she's filling everything with these female dominating characters, but the fact that it's like she envisions herself probably maybe from being a producer all these years in a male-dominated world, and she kind of sort of warped her thing, that she's now populating characters in all her franchises that more or less do the same thing. Now, here's something, though, David, that you do have to understand. These are characters, though, that have already been established. So this is not a case of, oh, we're going to write a bunch of, like, we're going to do a female-centric cast. Hera, Ahsoka, Sabine, they existed already in Rebels.
Yep.
All they're doing is they're taking this crew and putting them in the series and telling us, because essentially, like I said, this is Rebels Season 5, essentially, right? Rebels lasted 4 seasons. You can look at Ahsoka as Rebels Season 5. So even though that whole thing, especially with Kathleen Kennedy, is a very real issue that just is horrible, and now people are starting to rebel against, by the way, you can't really fully paint that picture with this, because these are characters that came from Filoni himself. They're well established. We're talking about a series that was on like 10 years ago. You know, this predated all that stuff. So
yeah,
I should point that out. David was like, Eric's going in. Yeah, well, absolutely, because it's becoming more of an issue now. That's the problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I think the bottom line is, I think you can show women being strong without emasculating men, you know, and then that's basically what
that's another one.
Problem,
yes.
I'm saying.
Yes.
But outside of that, though, I mean, you know, I have no qualms. Like I said, I have no qualms with female characters. I've said this time and time again. You know, I love Wonder Woman. I love, you know, I love the Supergirl series that they had, you know, loved it, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, but there's established canon to support everything that they're doing, and it makes sense. And it's not really necessarily, I mean, on the Supergirl series, yeah, you have some of that, you know, going on, but it wasn't so egregious that you couldn't enjoy the series.
Not only that,
however,
it wasn't like an overpowering thing too, where it just gets so ridiculous that there's no challenges, no lessons, no nothing. It's just, oh, I'm already I'm already super powerful and I already know everything. And now I'm going to teach all these evil males, what they should do. And it's like, okay, that's actually terrible storytelling. You're not empowering women at all. All you're doing is just telling a really bad story.
Yeah.
Peter Griffin's got a couple of things. He says, Ahsoka, 7 seasons of Clone Wars plus the 4 Rebels. I just hope it has a great story. Well, it definitely has a pedigree. At least, like you said, you have all this backstory from the Clone Wars and then through Rebels. And from a storytelling and production standpoint, just from what I've seen in the trailer, like I said, there's concerns. Don't want to skirt around that, but it does look like it should be good. Now, is it going to be Andor good? My apologies to David right out the gate. I don't know. And then Peter also goes on to say, we need a solid win like Mando, seasons 1 and 2. Yeah, I agree. And actually, the franchise does. And it's funny because one of the people that commented, I think it might have been on the 5 Directors show. Or it might have been the other one we did with the Filoni-based one, Anakin being the greatest Jedi. But I think it was the 5 Directors, because we had said that, it just has to keep being a timeless series, tell good stories. And this person who commented basically was like, you know what? Once all the older people either get dementia or just die of old age, nobody's going to care. And I pointed out in my response to that absolutely 100% agree. Because one thing, there's a million things that Disney has gotten wrong, but one thing they've really gotten wrong in their quest to court the current generation and try to put some of their social issues in and just redo Star Wars in its image is they've lost the point. The point is they're not going to appeal to anybody now. Lucas was the master of telling timeless stories that appealed to multiple generations. And they're basically dumping all over that. And if they don't fix it pretty soon, because like this commenter had said, they're running out of time. They're going to come to a point where nobody's going to care about Star Wars. It's going to be a dead franchise if they keep this up.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's why we have this whole thing about really understanding what Star Wars actually is, and you can't treat it like you would do anything else. It's not your typical. It doesn't follow the typical guidelines or rules as a lot of other franchises, and that's what people have to understand. You can't just slap anything into the Star Wars canister and then push it on people. It's kind of like putting cheap liquor in a good liquor bottle. It's like, okay, people who drink can tell, like, no, this is crap. And that's essentially what's happening, unfortunately, with the writing, with a lot of people not really truly understanding Star Wars. Which is kind of, but then once again, you have someone at the helm in Kathleen Kennedy who really just kind of wants to just do her own thing, and just she's stepping all over what George has done, and that's so unfortunate, especially because she's been around him pretty much the longest. She's around him longer than Filoni has, probably. So it's kind of like it's really at the point, like the commenter said, that Star Wars has to have some consistency. It has to have some wins back to back. I liken it to my favorite college football team of Michigan. You got to win the big ones. You got to beat Michigan State. You got to beat Ohio State. No one cares about the other teams. And what's happened is, like, in the film world, we haven't had a whole lot of wins, with Star Wars. It's been, okay, we had a Rogue One, okay, but then after that, nothing. Then it's like, okay, Force Awakens, but then it's like it showed promise, Sure, but then right back to the slums it went with, The Last Jedi, and then the Rise of Skywalker even kind of further pushed it down. So now it's kind of like, okay, well, The Mandalorian kind of brought it up a little bit, but then now we know we still need like consistency. Andor has done well. I know David doesn't like it, but like by and large, a lot of people love Andor.
Sure,
and
but Obi-Wan and Book of Boba Fett were heavily criticized, though. So once again, even in television, there's a hit and miss.
Exactly, and so that's what I'm saying. There seems to be no consistency, and you can't really trust what you're getting from Star Wars. Where at one point, you always knew.
Right, that's the key. It was a bankable franchise that if it had the Star Wars name on it, it was good. Speaking of David, he says, I bet you all $20 worth of Buy Me a Coffees that they destroy up Ahsoka's character like they did Thor and Wanda. And so I sort of sit on the fence on that one, only because on one hand, Ahsoka is very much Filoni's baby. Yeah. It's going to be front and center. He is not going to allow anybody to come in and do anything with that character without his express. I would be surprised if that wasn't written into his contract somewhere.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he's the writer of this show. I mean, that's the thing. He's writing the show, and the thing about Filoni is like, if you look at the Clone Wars, and of course, a lot of that was partly Lucas as well, because Lucas was still,
yeah,
putting that together too.
Only season 7. That was the only one that was Lucas free.
Yeah, exactly. But then when you start looking at Rebels, though, Rebels was phenomenal.
Yep.
So he knows how to tell stories. I mean, look at The Mandalorian. Like I said, the first 2 seasons, he and Favreau told great stories.
But he and Favreau really was like also did season 3, though.
And Favreau is like, Favreau's more the director. Filoni is more the storyteller.
Yeah. But I'm just saying it's not infallible. You gotta... That's why... So I don't necessarily agree that the Ahsoka character is going to go down like, basically they did with Wanda and Thor. I don't think that's going to happen.
The question is, I can't say that, but I'll ask David this question. Are you saying that's going to happen initially or down the road?
Well, that's a good point too. But I would even go, so that's one way you can look at it.
Because I could kind of see that.
Absolutely. Like, initially, it's great, but then down the road, it's kind of what happened to The Mandalorian, right? I mean, season 1 and 2, really good. Season 3, not so much. But Ahsoka in The Mandalorian was handled really well. And if that's how they're going to handle this, then great. Now, I will say this, though. Another way that you can look at it is maybe Ahsoka is cool, but everybody around her is... they ruin it. All right. So Peter basically says, I don't think they mess Ahsoka up, but I am worried about how they do Thrawn.
That's a good question, Peter.
Yeah. He says, I just hope they don't have Thrawn and the twirling mustache villain. So again, I would point this out. Filoni was the one who brought Thrawn back out of the graveyard of legends.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that actually brought Thrawn into the current canon. And then, of course, Timothy Zahn wrote those really good books and, kept Thrawn going in novel form. And then, of course, there's, been a bunch of comics and stuff like that. But
I love in the trailer how they acknowledged, they called him, say he's heir to the Empire.
Heir to the Empire. Yeah, I was saying that during the trailer. That. It's like, all right, you guys, it's a little on the nose, maybe, just kind of putting it out there. But
for those real fans, they get it. But
sure.
Everybody else, it makes sense.
Well, here's another thing. Here's another thing, though. This kind of lends credence to the whole rumors of Filoni actually putting the seeds in of an Heir to the Empire movie. That he's planning on adapting the Thrawn, or the Thrawn trilogy by Zahn. And I have often said that you could easily do that, even though you don't really have Han, Luke, and Leia like you did you can easily revamp those stories to where you keep pretty much the main elements of that story and you just repopulate it with, I mean, you could do it with some of the sequel characters, although I don't know if that would be as popular, but you don't even have to do that. You don't even have to touch Rey, Finn, Poe, and all those guys. You can do that with pretty much, you just keep, creating the Mandoverse and building that up, and you'd be fine. But again, I just want to remind everybody that Filoni's the one that brought him into Thrawn and used him really well in Rebels. So I have no reason really to believe that. And it is the same guy that it's Lars Mikkelsen that's playing him, right?
Yep. So the same guy who played him.
Yeah. So the guy, exactly right. The guy that played him in Rebels is playing him here. So I don't know. I can't help but think that Thrawn, especially because Filoni more than anybody knows how revered Thrawn is in the Star Wars fandom. I don't think that they're going to risk messing that up. Peter goes on to say, I actually think they will kill Ahsoka off in season 2 or in the big movie finale. Rey only hears Ahsoka's voice. That's a good point. But then again, she doesn't necessarily have to be killed off in any grandiose way. I mean, Force Awakens takes place something like 25 years after the events of Ahsoka. She's already probably in her 40s.
Yeah, so at the time of Mandalorian, she's between 40 and 45 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, she'd be like
I'm just really
70.
Honestly, like, I'm just really curious as to how did she escape Vader? That's all I really want to know. Like, you got to give me that. Like, I want that in season 1, honestly. I mean, we got 8 episodes with Ahsoka. So we get in the first 2. August 23rd?
Mm-hmm.
Today it's released.
Yeah, it's only like a month from now.
Yeah. So, but I just need to know how she escaped that whole battle with Vader.
Well, they might. I mean, it's not up there with the Sarlacc pit thing, but it is up there in the minds of Rebels fans. And they certainly address how Boba Fett escaped the Sarlacc pit, so, maybe they will. Mm-hmm. David says, this is going to be a Star Wars chick flick. Here's what they should have named it. Sex in the City, Star Wars Edition. That would have been nice. Destiny's Child in Space or Space Girls. Well, all right. I'm assuming you would probably know better than I would. I'm assuming that David has not seen Rebels.
No, he has not.
Okay. So, David, before
He's
you go
barely
crazy,
seen the original trilogy.
I mean, look, before you go crazy with thinking all these crazy things, you really need to see Rebels in order to get the proper context. And
David's just trolling.
Well, the other thing, though, is that even if he is, it still brings up a good point, though, because I wonder how many people because a lot of times people don't get invested in the animated series. They're more movie people, and maybe some of them imported down to television. Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things that you really do need to see Rebels. Filoni himself said you don't necessarily have to see it to enjoy Ahsoka, and I have no doubt that that's true. But if you really want to be enriched and really fully understand the totality of Ahsoka,
everything that's going on,
yeah, you really do. There's just no escaping it.
Because, like in the trailer, I mean, you see like the wall that leads to the world between worlds. I mean, that's a huge part.
It's kind of a big plot point.
Exactly, that's a huge plot point, man. Like,
huge plot point.
And then you got to see how, like, Ezra, like, okay, well, who the heck is Ezra? Who's this kid? Like, if you watch Rebels, you would know who Ezra is and why Sabine is so hell bent on finding him. And like, okay, well, he's got to be with Thrawn. If Thrawn is returned, Ezra must be around. Like, watching Rebels gives you a whole lot of backstory, a whole lot of backstory on all the characters for the most part. It gives you backstory on Hera. It gives you backstory on Sabine. It gives you backstory on Ezra. I mean, and even as Ahsoka to a degree. So even though Ahsoka originally was a Clone Wars animation character,
her story
originally,
did continue in Rebels, and
but
it was
continued in
significant.
Rebels.
It was significant, and she became like
massively.
Fulcrum, and it was it was big. It was major. It wasn't just like some cameo thing. The other
like
thing
I said, when that whole scene with her and Vader is in Rebels, like that's what I mean. Like, there's a lot of meat in Rebels that you have to, and that's why you bring up continuation.
Yes, but that just triggered something else. Hey, don't forget Hayden Christensen is in this, which means they're going to be flashing back to Anakin scenes. So a lot of what happened in Rebels, as far as that battle between Vader and her, a lot of it's going to play into it. Again, like I said, I mean, Filoni would know more than anybody, but I have no doubt in my mind that you could totally enjoy Ahsoka without seeing Rebels or even the Clone Wars, although I wouldn't advise that. All right, so we got some chats. Peter said, David might be right, especially if they don't find Ezra until the last episode. And he was talking about the Acolyte as well. Yes, it's another female-led. That one, unfortunately, probably is more guilty of Kathleen Kennedy's like weird obsession with, alpha male-like female characters. So, like I said, I'm 100% on board with that point. But just the problem is that even though there might be an influence where they might try to tweak some of these characters and lean that way, all of these characters were legitimately in the series before any of this stuff started. So you can't really say that. They're not, I mean, okay, these Inquisitor-like people,
characters.
Yeah, they're not shoehorning characters in, but because we haven't even talked about the Inquisitor-like people who are supposedly like maybe fallen Jedi. I don't know. We'll get to that in a second. David says, I'm not crazy and I'm not trolling. Daryl, could you honestly not see the writing on the wall in this trailer?
I saw the pictures. Yeah, it had
you
Ezra,
can tell
had the
that it's going to be a propaganda dump. He's saying it's going to be a propaganda dump. So what David...
I don't know.
Let me just play devil's advocate on this one, which I sometimes end up doing with David.
Well, this is head-to-head, so let's go.
And again, I'm not at the point where I'm agreeing with him yet, but I am seeing the side that he's presenting. Because I don't think that David's necessarily saying that these characters didn't exist or they were created solely for the show. I think accepting that fact that they weren't is the fact that he might be saying that they might tweak them, they might write them in a certain way. Now, I would say probably not, because Filoni is more in control of this than Kathleen Kennedy. If Kathleen Kennedy were in charge of this, like if she were micromanaging this, absolutely, without question. The fact that it's more Filoni and Favreau, and from what I understand, Kennedy hasn't interfered too much with this show, I don't think you're going to see that kind of a thing. And you have to understand, that's why I implore you to go back and watch the Rebels episodes, because the problem is, being that they've done this so much, you might be really sensitive to it. Like anytime, Sabine seems like powerful or something, you might be like, see? But no, she really was. I mean, if you look at Sabine in Rebels, man, they were all butt kickers in that show. All of them.
Yeah.
All the chick characters are butt kickers in that show. This is not some crazy female empowerment thing. This is really more like the Leia, Mara Jade, Ahsoka, in Clone Wars. So this is all Lucas Filoni based.
Yeah, my thing is, well, I understand that, like you said, Eric, with Filoni, this is his baby, this is his project. I mean, because he created Rebels. I mean, and quite frankly, it was super successful. And I don't think Kathleen Kennedy is going to have her hand too much in it, simply because majority of the cast are female. So it's like, okay, you're already getting what you want anyway. Like,
that's true.
What do you need to stick your hand in?
Like, she might actually be, I'll let this go, because obviously you're already on the right track, and they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you already have powerful female characters anyway. So There's no need to create even more. Now it depends on, if they free Ezra and what happens with that, then but then once again, you still have the show was called Ahsoka. It's about her. So
yeah. Well,
you
that's
gotta
the
kind
other
of
thing
wonder,
too.
like,
That's true, right? Like, I mean, how much of this is just trailer stuff versus what the actual show is like? That's why I say, I mean, look, while we're just watching trailers, I would always say, look, guys, we really can't be too critical of this thing yet until we start seeing some episodes. And then, in what might seem a tad hypocritical, when the first 2 episodes drop, I'm going to turn around and say, okay, there's like 8 episodes of this thing. So you have to really wait until more like episode 4 before you could really start to go, okay, I'm getting a sense of what this story is like. And then you have to wait until the thing is done before you can really go full-blown critique. Peter says, I think the father, daughter, brother will be explained as well. People will wonder why a bird is following Ahsoka everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, well, and then didn't she turn into an owl or something like at the end of that duel? And I think that might, yeah.
And even at the end of season 7 of Rebels, she turned into, because remember when Vader came and picked up the lightsabers of Ahsoka, he looked up and he saw that owl once again flying off.
Yeah, so there's something to that.
Yeah.
So then Peter goes on to say, I hope I don't have to explain to everyone in the house every episode. Well, it depends. I will say this. So it depends on how into it everyone in your house is. If they just take everything at face value, you're in the clear. Because, again, according to Filoni, you don't have to watch all the source material in order to enjoy Ahsoka. Now, enjoying Ahsoka versus having a complete understanding of Ahsoka, those are 2 different things. So, the people in your household. So here's what I would say. If your household is inquisitive, and if they, I know, I saw what I did there. And if they're, if they watch stuff a little bit discerning, and they're not really like surface face value type people, you're going to want to start queuing up at least episodes of Rebels right now. And do you have to watch all 4 seasons or whatever? No, but you should pick some key episodes from each season that are basically an abbreviated story. Like you can skip the Space Whales episode, for instance, and some of the other stuff.
You might need it because, they might bring that back in there. So.
Well, who knows? Well, don't forget, Lando actually played a pretty key role. And in fact, Billy D. Williams' original return to Star Wars was voicing Lando in Rebels. I think a lot of people, because it's been a while, I think a lot of people forget just about how much of a key Rebels really was in this whole canon, But Peter, he's chatting in a million different things. This is another thing that he brings up that's a good question. Any chance Fenn will be Mara Jade? No way they go in that direction, right? I don't think so.
Come on, Fennec Sham?
No. That's like, there's another, it's like the Inquisitor chick. They had they had actually revealed the names of some of these people. Because, he even goes on to say, Fenn or whatever the Dark Jedi lady's name is.
Okay, gotcha.
Probably not. I will say this. There is significant to why their blades are orange and not red. That's something that Filoni revealed, although he didn't reveal why, but I'm assuming that we're going to learn that at some point in the show. The other thing is, don't forget that Mara actually had a purple lightsaber long before Samuel L. Jackson requested one. And if Filoni, being a stickler for legends and everything that he is, if he was going to throw that out there, he would have definitely had her have the purple lightsaber. The other thing is, while this would be a good time to introduce her, because after all, that's where Mara Jade, she was introduced during this basic time period in Legends. Although it was a little closer to Return of the Jedi. It wasn't quite 5 years out. It was really more like a year out. But still, I mean, it's same time period, right? So
Right.
I don't know if they're actually going to bring her in, because then you would have to, you could still do the whole her and Luke romance and stuff like that, but it just, I don't know. You'd have to wrap it up in 25 years, though, because Luke, nobody ever mentioned her in the sequel trilogy, so that would be a thing. Let's see who else we got. Peter, shoot, I think Father, Daughter, Brother was Clone Wars. It was. They have some homework to do. It was. They were kind of like the embodiments of the various. The father was kind of like over the entire Force, and then you had the brother who was the dark side, and the sister who was the light. And yeah, that was kind of a weird. It was a cool little story arc, but it was really bizarre, and it did shine a light. And of course, they were the ones that are like, "Ooh, Anakin, you're gonna be a dark side guy one day." And then wasn't that the one too where like Anakin seemed dark, or maybe Ahsoka did? Because it was almost like they were teasing that Ahsoka might go dark, and then she fought Anakin at that point, and I remember that was weird. David says, on a lighter note, it looks cool. I really want it to be great. Look, we all do, dude. It has so much potential, like a lot of Star Wars stuff that they dropped the ball on. The chick playing Ahsoka is a great actress, playing a great character. It should be amazing. See, that's the thing. There's a lot of things in Lucasfilm. You can even go to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. If you just read that on paper, it should be amazing. There's a lot of things that should be cool, right? But they're not necessarily cool. Oh, Daryl's frozen. Okay, hold on. Let me just say, come back. So yeah, a lot of things should be, but a lot of times they're not. So again, that's the problem with Disney and Lucasfilm under Disney, is that they just dropped the ball on everything. Let's see what we got here. Got something from Peter. He says, same, David. Even a C rating would be an L in my book. This has to be great. Yeah, I mean, look, it is no surprise that people are now starting to get a little bit weary of Star Wars. That it's, you know, you can only fail so many times. And this is something that Daryl and I had said a long time ago. And that is that with Star Wars, is invincible and bulletproof of a franchise it has always seemed to be. And we said this like a couple of years ago. I forgot what we were talking about. It was something like this, though, where it's like, okay, the future of Star Wars or something like that. But it can only afford so many hits. It can only take so many hits before even the mighty Star Wars franchise eventually falls. And that's the problem. The problem is that I think we're starting to get to that point where people got with Marvel. Because look, Dial of Destiny bombed, right? That was like a big, because people weren't that nuts about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And you're seeing Marvel movies are not opening as big as they used to anymore. So you're actually seeing a lot of box office failures and things like that, and it's showing that people are getting a little bit weary of Star Wars. And, you know, it's kind of like I was telling the person that was commenting on one of our shows, which, by the way, if you guys, you want to keep the discussion going, you can comment on all these videos too, and I'll keep answering, and, you know, we'll keep discussing stuff. But one of the things that I brought up was that this franchise is a very critical point right now where it cannot afford really any more missteps. The only thing that it can do is if you give us something great and then you maybe follow it up with something mediocre, people might be able to forgive the mediocre part if it's something phenomenal. So we'll have to see. Peter says, offered Anakin to be father and he turned it down. The daughter sacrificed her force to Ahsoka, so I guess she's a daughter now. And then Peter went on to say, you know, Ahsoka died, didn't she? I have to go rewatch that arc. No, see, that's the thing. It was like she fought Vader, And then it kind of looked like she just sort of disappeared or kind of pulled an Obi-Wan or something. And then it was implied that she was this weird owl-like creature. Flew away. Then at the very end, when you fast forward to the final episode, Rebels, one of the epilogue moments, after they basically showed pretty much where all the characters were as of around Return of the Jedi, they then did this whole scene where Vader went back to the site where they dueled, and he was sort of mourning Ahsoka and what was lost, and then he, she was the owl again or whatever, watching over him and flies away or whatever. I mean, that's kind of how they ended that. So, I see you're back, Daryl. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Always good. So yeah, I mean, these are just some of the things. David says, in this series, is this series more of a political thing like Andor, or is this more action-driven? It's action-driven.
Action-driven.
Yeah, the trailer makes me think this is going to be a lot of action, but I could be wrong. No, it's totally action. I won't say it's totally action, but I mean, it's a lot of action.
A lot of action.
Yeah. It's more of what Star Wars really... Well, I hesitate to say this because I haven't seen it. The trailer purports it to be more of what Star Wars should be.
That's not your typical Star Wars.
Yeah, but again, that's not to say it's devoid of story, though. I mean, see, that's the thing, is that a lot of times people, one of the things that makes Star Wars great, and again, if you guys missed any of that stuff, we did this whole series on what Star Wars is, particularly the first episode of that series, which is just called What is Star Wars? You can go find it on our channel. And then we subsequently reviewed every single film in the franchise and then pointed out, what made it Star Wars. Why is Star Wars what it is? And, when it came to the sequel trilogy and somewhat of the prequels too, we did point out where it went wrong. But this is giving you the lore, the war, good stories. Sure, there's a little bit of political intrigue, but it's not going to be any more than what we saw in the original trilogy. Maybe at most the prequels.
Yeah, David's big thing is because he felt like Andor was too slow, and I understand that. Like,
for sure,
Andor was really slow, and it was it's a slow burn. This is more medium to fast pace. You're gonna get more. You're gonna get more lightsaber duels. You're gonna get more, blowing up, and you're gonna see. Thrawn is kind of, and David, I'm going to be interested to see how you feel about Thrawn, because Thrawn, that's the guy in the picture right now, the blue guy. Thrawn is very strategic. He's a mind. So I know
he's the Sherlock Holmes, basically, of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, so you should like this character.
But, well, and that's why Thrawn became, look, he was the first. Thrawn was really the first brand new character created outside of Lucas's Star Wars that everybody would just super psycho over. I mean, people are as super psycho over Thrawn as much as they are Vader, the Emperor, Luke Skywalker, any of that. And that came from the mind of Timothy Zahn back in 1991 when he wrote the trilogy of books that essentially was his version of episodes 7 through 9. And that's why when Disney bought Lucasfilm, we all thought, well, sweet. Surely they're going to take Zahn's trilogy and just make movies out of them, because that would have made infinite sense. See, that was the first time that I was kind of like, I don't know if this purchase is such a good idea. It didn't raise too many red flags because I'm like, well, okay, maybe enough time has passed and everything. And, Lucas, of course, in that time did come out with the prequels, but still, that was kind of the first clue. Peter Chadson says, I meant in the Clone Wars episode, Ahsoka died and the daughter lay next to her and gave her Force soul to Ahsoka and she woke up. Yeah, it's been a minute since I've seen that one, but that sounds right. There's a lot of those Clone Wars episodes, you have to understand something. Lucas did not view canon quite the same way fans do. Lucas basically kind of like doing his own thing, not really caring what the fans considered. I mean, I remember even when the expanded universe came out, Lucas's idea was the only thing that is canon is my stuff. If it came from me, then it is. If it didn't, then it's glorified fan fiction. But what happened was, occasionally people would somehow write to him or whatever and ask questions like, hey, this little thing that happened in the expanded universe. Sometimes Lucas would throw the fans a bone and say, okay, fine, that's official. Other things that Lucas started to do in the prequel trilogy was he would take things like Quinlan Voss, who was a character in the expanded universe. He put him in episode 3. He's mentioned by name. And, he would throw fans a bone like that. He would borrow things from the expanded universe and put them in there. He would do that with the video games sometimes too, and say, okay, this is canonical. But for the most part, he really didn't care. So when he's writing stuff like the Clone Wars, he's just coming up with really good stories. In other words.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the question becomes, and you guys still have about 20 or 30 seconds left to chat in. What were your thoughts on the overall trailer? I mean, did this make you more excited for it? Do you have some reservations like Daryl and I? Because, honestly, I could probably do another hour on some of the concerns. And again, I don't want to give the impression that I didn't like it or I'm nervous about this or any of that stuff. There's just some stuff in this thing where I'm like, okay, I'm cautiously optimistic. That's probably the way that I would sum this up. What about you? Because we got to get your thoughts on it.
I'm pretty much the same. I mean, I trust Filoni. This is his thing. This is his, this is his baby. This is something that he's been building for a while.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just like the Mandalorian where it just kind of popped up out of nowhere, but no, Rebels has been established. So, and I'm sure there's probably more story he wanted to explore with these characters that these are all his babies pretty much. So I'm really curious to see what he does with it. I hope it makes sense. I hope it's true to Star Wars and he's not forced to do anything dumb. But we'll find out August 23rd.
Yeah, and keep in mind, there's something I should point out too before we, jettison this conversation. This is only season 1. Like, even if we get to the end of season 1 and we're like, I've got some concerns or whatever about how things are going, it's like, we don't actually know how many seasons he intends to go. Now, if he only wants to go a couple of seasons, well, then yeah, you could put more weight on this. But if he wants to go like 5 or 6, again, you have to wait till see how it shakes out. That's not to say you can't critique each season or even each episode and take them on their own merit. Certainly you can, and you should. But at the same time, you got to reserve a little bit of judgment. David says, it's a conglomerate of mixed emotions. Great show, gentlemen. May the force be with you always. Lastly, is the gift box coming still? Excited to get it. Yes, it is. We're kind of slow on getting this stuff together. That's the problem. We offer all this stuff, and now it's like, oh, we got to make it now. So, we do thank you for your contributions. And again, if anybody else wants to support us, we got great packages, which we're actually going to, honor and do. And all you got to do is go into the buymeacoffee.com link in the description below. You guys can make like a one-time donation. You can support us. There's all kinds of things that you can do in there. So again, leave a comment. Let us know what you guys are thinking about this thing. Are you cautiously optimistic like us? Are you all in? Do you think this is going to be like the greatest series ever? Are you guys skeptical? Like, do you feel the way David does about Andor? Or you're just not sure? Leave a comment in the comment section and we can continue the discussion there. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And Friday, we're going to be talking about... I just blanked out. What was it?
It's you.
Yeah, it's in our texts. I do know that next Monday we're going to go through the top... I think it's the top 5 guys that could... top 5 Jedi, both canon and legends, that could defeat Palpatine. Ran across this article today, and I thought, you know what? This would be a blast to get you guys in on the discussion and see what you think of it. If any of you guys know some of these people, because even though I've read a lot of the Legends books, there's a lot of these guys, I'm like, I don't even know who that is. So there is that. But what are we talking about Friday?
Every live action change made to Ahsoka characters from Star Wars Rebels.
Yes. So it's kind of the sequel to today's discussion. So we can actually juxtapose what are the changes that they're making for the series versus what they actually had in Rebels. And of course, David says, no one could beat the greatest of all time. Well, good. We hope you weigh in on this thing. All right. So with that said, hopefully you guys join us Friday night. And till then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.